in our envelope to see what this problem says.
All right, this problem is the T6.7d, which says the student will be able to generate equivalent expressions using number properties. So I remember talking about two big number properties with my students this year. What'd you guys talk about?
One of the big ones that we talked about was the distributive property.
What was the distributive property about?
The distributive property tells us that when we have a number outside the parentheses, in front of the parentheses like you see right here, and some numbers inside the parentheses, some different terms inside the parentheses, like maybe 7 plus y, I have to distribute this 3 to the 7 and the y. Distribute means to pass out, so I'm going to make sure that the 3 gets multiplied by the 7 and the y.
Yeah, I remember my students always wanted to just do 3 times 7 and say they were done.
Yeah, so what I have my students do is I put a little rainbow right here and I put another one right here. That helps me to remember that I multiply the 3 times the 7 and the 3 times the y. So I would go ahead and do 3 times 7, and that would be 21. There's a plus sign here, so I'll bring that down, and 3 times y is 3y. So I've just distributed the 3 to the 7 and the y.
Okay, so 3 times the sum of 7 and y ends up equaling 21 plus 3y.
Correct.
Awesome, awesome. Well, one of the big topics we talked about was inverse operations. And we had to spend a lot of time on inverse operations, especially when we were solving equations and inequalities. We talked about how the opposite of adding was subtracting, and therefore the opposite of subtracting was adding. We also had to discuss multiplying. The opposite is dividing, and the opposite of dividing is multiplying. It's always important to remember our inverse operations when we have to solve an equation. So these are the problems that the problems that the bomb gave us.
All right, let's check them out.
The first one says, use the distributive property to write an equivalent expression to negative 3x plus 5. Oh, sorry, negative 3 times the sum of x and 5.
Okay, so if I'm using the distributive property, I have to make sure to distribute the negative 3 to the x and the 5. I have to multiply negative 3 by both the x and the 5. So I'm going to put my rainbows in here. That helps me to remember to multiply by both of them. Alright, so negative 3 times x, well, that would be negative 3x.
Negative 3x's plus.
Plus sign here, so I'll bring that down. And here I have negative 3 times positive 5. Well, I remember from earlier this year that if I'm multiplying a negative and a positive, my answer will be negative. The signs are different.
The signs are different, you're right. We used this guy right here, the madman.
Madman, I like him. Multiplying and dividing. So if I'm multiplying a negative times a positive, the signs are different. I would cross off that and that. That leaves me with a negative, so I know my answer is going to be negative. So negative 3 times 5 is negative 15.
That's not the best way you can write that equation, because you have a plus and a minus right here. So I know that adding a negative is the same thing as subtracting. So I think we should put into the bomb negative 3x minus 15. I think that's going to be a much better answer.
I like it. Let's keep that.
Okay. And the second problem, it says solve this equation using inverse operations. So this equation, okay, this bomb really liked negative 3 this day. Okay, negative 3x equals negative 12. I have a feeling we're going to use madman again for this, because a number next to a letter means to multiply. And the opposite of multiplying times negative 3 means to divide by negative 3. So we had to divide on the left side to get x by itself. We wanted to isolate the variable. And after we divide by -3 on the left side, those cross off. But we're not done because you also have to divide on the right side.
Right, I like to think of an equation as a balanced scale. So if I'm going to do something to one side, I have to do the same thing to the other side in order to keep it balanced, or else it's going to tip and will no longer be equal.
That's a great idea. So we've crossed these out. Now I got a negative divided by a negative. So looking at Madman, if I have two negatives, the signs are the same, my answer is going to be positive. And I know that 12 divided by 3 is 4, and we know it's a positive 4, so I'm going to say the answer is x equals 4.
I like it. How
All
can
right.
we check that answer to make sure it's right? We should probably check
yeah.
our solution.
Probably should. So since it says x equals 4, let's put 4 in for x.
Good idea.
Now, -3 times 4. A negative times a positive is a negative, and 3 times 4 is
12.
12. Did it work?
We got negative 12 here, negative 12 there. Works.
All right, let's try these answers in the bottom.
Sounds
All right, here's our answers. Let's see if it works.
Oh yeah, it's correct.
We got it correct. I always get so nervous whenever we put those answers in that we're going to blow up.